And we can talk about, so we can see who pops in, if anybody. There we go. Somebody here. Who else is here? Jamie, me. All right, we'll get cooking in a minute. How you doing, Mr. Blackburn?
Good.
So I have my my mug, okay, for everybody that wants to know where my alliances are.
It's okay.
So I know you're a college town down there.
We're a college town, but we have the Panthers the closest.
That's true.
There was a time when we were Washington and or Atlanta based area.
Wow.
Many moons ago. We used to vote for which one was to be played if they played at the same time.
Oh, I see. Nice. We have Jinmin here and Miriam. So Jinmin, welcome, and Miriam, both. Well, you're the early attendees, so you get an extra cookie. So yeah, you can go get that real quick, and then we'll get cooking. We have a bunch of. I had talked to some folks that said they won't be able to access it online. That they're going to come as far as getting in via phone. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll get cooking in just a minute. Let us know where you guys are from. I'm from Maryland, and these guys are you're in North Carolina, right?
Cary, North Carolina.
Cary, North Carolina.
Right,
so
smack
fair.
between Durham and Raleigh.
Yeah. Yep, that's fantastic. I'm up here just outside of DC in Woodstock, Maryland. If anybody knows where that is, that's pretty crazy. But Ellicott City area, probably know that from all the floods that we've had in the past. So that's good. So yeah, let us know where. Danny, welcome aboard. Jay, welcome. We'll get cooking in just a minute. And William, awesome, fantastic. Glad you guys decided to join us. We have a bunch of other folks that have said they were coming. So we'll see who shows up. You guys get the prize for showing up. That's all I know. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. Data collection, compilation, communication, and reporting. Glad that you decided to join us. The guy that I've been bantering with is Jamie Blackburn. He's the director of iAdvantage software down there in Cary, North Carolina. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah. So he'll be hanging out with us. This is an interagency briefing, and we have a ton of different folks that said they're going to be here. But if not, everybody gets a recording. So there you have it. So welcome, folks. We got people from the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. We had a couple of folks sign up for that, and I said, hey, that's an interesting agency. But a lot of the folks we already recognize. But we have folks from Justice and ICE and FEMA and HRSA. We're just really glad that you decided to join us, and we appreciate you being here. This will be the best briefing ever. Jeff from the Treasury says it includes information or something slightly lower than a technical expert. Did you hear that, Jamie? Slightly lower.
Slightly lower.
Slightly lower.
Right.
And for FAA, Sarah from FAA, if I learn how to maintain data integrity, hey now, isn't that right in our wheelhouse?
That's perfect.
That's right. I love it. And Amina from ICE, if it's relatable, you got to be relatable, Jamie.
Okay.
Just saying. And Charlemar, what a cool name. Charlemar from USPTO, devise data and survey results and the survey tools. Love it. We have some of that. Barbara from FAA. I'm not sure what to expect and would be interested in how this brief can be beneficial to aerospace medicine. I don't know. We will see if it will be. Margaret from DOE, roles of contracting officer in process. Love that, because there are roles for contracting officers, right, Jamie?
Yes.
Absolutely. Jennifer from Census, I come away knowing how to collect data with no errors. Woo! I don't know how about no errors, Jamie? Can you do that?
No, none at all. That might be a problem, but we can certainly diminish them.
That's right. You diminish them and we come to a place where it actually works. All right. So please address this. Does this have all authorization to operate in the VA and the VA firewall? Great question. Janny FDIC says data integrity discussion, present takeaways I can use. All right. How could, for ISA says, how could research management centers provide effective reporting on research performance for the organization? That's something I know we're going to talk about, right, Jamie?
Yeah.
And Lisa from the Treasury, how is R&D data different from other data categories and data management quality and necessity for cleansing. Well, that's good because Lisa, we're going to be talking about that. And if you get the right data coming in, what happens, Jamie?
You end up with the right output, with
That's
the right decisions.
You get it clean on the way in, and that is how you get your necessity for cleansing, drive that down. Right, Jamie?
Absolutely.
And Tatiana from MPS, I like to have redundancy so if someone messes up a file, there's a backup. Do you have the best practice suggestions for that? Love that. Give the quick answer to that, Jamie.
Yes, we have the right answer. And yes, that's one of the reasons we've gone to the cloud.
That's right. And Jeff from Treasury, what recommended strategies for ensuring data integrity and accessibility as systems and requirements evolve in the future? Great question. Data integrity is the key, right, Jamie?
Absolutely.
That's right. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We'll give you some introductions to Jamie and his crew from iAdvantage Software in Cary, North Carolina, as well as briefing controls if you've been under a rock for the past year and you don't have any idea how to do anything virtually. Big agency data challenges, effective design framework, all about the framework, right, Jamie? You get the right framework, what happens?
Well, right framework gives you the right outcomes.
That's right. And what is the eStudy platform? We're going to touch on that because that's your solution that you provide. And it's based on the scientific method, just a little teaser, and maximize data flexibility and integrity, get to your Q&A, and you can ask questions throughout, as well as the recommended action sets, procurement options, and additional resources if you need them. You do have access to the session docs coming right now from Terry, I think. Is Terry in? Terry will drop this in, I hope. Terry, drop that in for us for the briefing presentation, as well as so that you can do that. If you have not been accessing anything via Zoom over the past year, not sure where you've been, but you can adjust things, and that might be new. You can go up to that little control and you can make us bigger or smaller, whatever you'd like to see. And we love participation, don't we, Jamie?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And you can do it by chatting, by raising your hand, entering Q&A, and also if you want something individualized that doesn't get out for all the public, send it to info@iAdvantagesoftware.com. That will be available throughout the presentation if you want to address something outside of this. Quick disclaimer, GovBrief is not affiliated or endorsed by GSA or any other agency. It's provided to you, the audience, for informational purposes only. You're not going to believe this, but all participation in this briefing is voluntary, and engagement by you, government personnel, is not an indication of endorsement to purchase from any vendor, including iAdvantage. So we got that out of the way. So guess what happens? Now you can talk, because that was given to us by GSA so that you could actually participate in this and answer questions like, why in the world did you decide to show up here? Are you in management and want my data to work? Everybody should pick that. You can pick as many as you want here, by the way. I'm in R&D and have a current data collection need. I'm tired of scrubbing bad data. Can't imagine that anybody's here from that. I'm in procurement and want to know about iAdvantage, or my boss made me come. So there you go. So we'll get your information in there, and that's painless as you do these. And we'll talk a little bit about iAdvantage while you're filling that out. And let's give an overview of what you guys are all about. I know that you're located in Cary, North Carolina. We said that a couple of times. Tell us a little bit more about you, Jamie, and how you got in this world.
Sure. So iAdvantage Software was started by scientists. Our founders were scientists, and they had a peculiar problem in which they had to collect data throughout the world, and they had to collect good data, and they couldn't go back and ask a second time. And so they actually started out as consultants to in the ag world. They started having to do extensive compliance reporting, and this evolution of going from paper into a good data collection to having it readily available so that you can do lots of data science with it afterwards, AI and so forth, pushed us to the cloud. Just last year, we actually went to the cloud. But most importantly, we're GxP compliant. If no one understands what that means, it means we have to have a procedure, we have to be auditable, we have to have all our boxes checked to make sure that we're always collecting good data and collecting it well. But more so, and more importantly, is the tool that we use allows us to design the collection of data. And it was last year we became a GSA, and we're out there today, readily available for companies to engage with us.
That's right. And that's fantastic because you have a unique offering. Again, getting back to the biggest challenges that are happening in just about every agency, right? So we've been talking to a lot of different agencies about this and their big data challenges because everybody has the same problems. And it all revolves around making sure that the fundamental framework in the beginning works right. So tell us a little bit about those challenges that everybody's seeing, so everybody knows they're not alone.
So in these days, we're able to collect data. We all think of ways we would collect data. What we don't think about is how the data is going to be used later. And we don't think about the fact that, even today, right, if you put something in Excel, it used to be we would pass the Excel file through email. But now it's growing at such great rates and it's easily available for people to enter. Well, now guess what? We have the other side of the problem. We're drinking from a fire hose. So, 4 filing cabinets of data every 15 minutes. I don't know where they're kept, but I know that it's growing, using lots of electricity. It's a huge management issue because what happens is, and we've all done it, we've gotten data and some people just who had to enter it, maybe the right controls weren't put in, but bottom line is you get things like falsification or oversummation, or they derive it, or they, worse yet, they manipulate it before they give it to you. And you're
no way, nobody's trying to manipulate data.
And you're making decisions upon this fact. And so there's things missing, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, like data provenance. Where did it originate from? Where did it come from? Well, that's the kind of problems we've been solving for 20 plus years. So what we're here to do is we show how we have used design and implementation of our tool, and in our science, it actually really scales very well to the rest of the world. It's a good practice and we're going to talk a little bit about best practices. And the most important thing is when you have bad data, you can't get insights from it. So your AI engines and your machine learning can't use that necessarily. In fact, worst case, we end up throwing away massive amounts of data. And it's an expensive habit to get into that position.
It sure is. And if you can use the data, and that's one of the other sides, right? So now there's a whole bunch of contracts that are dealing with scrubbing data to try to make it useful and using AI on the back end when you have bad data coming through the system, right? And to your point, let's get to understand how how folks are collecting data right now. And most of the time, I'll bet you, the last time I think we did this, we talked about the spreadsheet, right? And there you go. And people are using the spreadsheets even to this day. And this gets to the point about manipulation and having clean data and making sure that if anything gets changed, it gets changed, right, Jamie?
That's right. And how many times have you created an Excel spreadsheet and someone thinks they know Excel better than you, and they end up changing it around or reordering it? Yeah, it's a problem in the fact that, yeah, sure, Excel is better in paper and faxing, but it certainly isn't as good as a good method. And that's what we're touting as a good method, a scientific method to begin planning that data right at the get-go.
That's fantastic. And we know that a lot of folks still using spreadsheets. That's the way that they're doing it.
Absolutely.
And go ahead, Jamie.
No, it's a great way to start. We just think there's a better way, a step on from there. That's how most of our customers have for 20 plus years. Excel's been around a long time. I don't know if you know, before Excel, we had something called Lotus.
Lotus. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So those tools have proven their worth. But when it comes to collecting data for massive amounts and to keep the data and have the data valuable, not just today, but tomorrow, we feel like we have a better way to do that.
Oh, there's certainly better ways. And you have a lot of folks doing things via email now instead of doing that and then collecting it back. The challenge is making it consistent, right? And having the information be actually usable. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to end this poll, but we knew that was probably going to be your answer because we've been talking to a few people, right, Jamie?
That's right.
And here, just so everybody knows, you're not alone.
Yeah.
You got 86%. So there you go. Well, let me end that. Hold on a second. There we go. Stop sharing that. That way everybody but us get to be able to close that down. All right. So there you have it. So let's talk about how we get true value of data and what does that mean?
Sure.
What is true value?
So one of the things you want to do is come in with that mindset, right? Right now, what we tend to do is we think we need data and we jump to the end result of how we're going to collect it, whether it's emails or paper and Excel and so forth. But what we're saying is take a step back, right? Do a center field 2-step back before you charge the ball. And that is, you first start off with, first of all, be responsible for the data. People need to know that this has a purpose and this is my data collection. As simple as that sounds, we often jump to, can we please answer these questions?
All right.
Where if you give them that value statement up front, here's why we're doing it. It's very expensive to collect data. We tend to think, well, it's just a few extra minutes. No, there's people who will take a lot of time and then they ask you questions and then they say, well, I would answer that differently. And there's lots of, and so because you haven't done this upfront design and this thought process using a good methodology like a scientific methodology, you end up not really thinking out how people might think differently about your question or your request. So that expense needs to be upfront. You need to think about the expense. And then on the back end as well, because you're going to have to answer those questions if the data is back. And worse, you might have to ask them again. And nothing is worse than that. I know everyone here has probably experienced, you've gotten a survey or a form to fill out, and then they do it again because they didn't think through how some things should be collected.
And sometimes it's just the question phrasing, right? And
That's right.
because
We're going to talk about that, right?
and the types of different people. Go ahead.
And then the final thing is you really need to provide them the amount of time that they need to do this. You need to think this out. Well, if I'm going to ask them 100 questions or 100 things to provide, they might have to do research. They might say, what does this mean? They might be going over to bring 3 or 4 people in. And, you know, the average price, right? People per year, there's about 1,800 hours a year we get. And if you eat one of those hours up and meet 3 other people's, you're just starting to eat into the whole year of productivity. So it's important that you really plan and think about what you're going to do and why you're going to ask it.
Yep. And so this gets into the whole process here.
So the first thing is you got to keep your requests very straightforward and simple. We all understand that. I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but it's a good rule to do a check on, is what I'm asking correct? You know, is this what we need to ask for? And is this simple? Carefully designed. I use the word design in here because it is a design. You should have an expert. If you're collecting certain types of data, you don't want to overgeneralize. You want the expert to say, no, this is how that type person would answer the question. An expert will think about their source, decide what to collect. Sometimes we think we have to collect everything and then we'll figure it out later. Not good idea. Select a data collection software. I don't want to say that we're a good one, but we are a good one, but there's others too as well. And we'll even help direct you there because we don't want you using our product if it's not right for you. And you got to collect clean data. There is no second try. Again, nothing is worse than asking them a second time because they might answer it differently. Now you have to figure out which forms you're going to, if you're taking 10 items and you add a new one in, guess what? You have to now put them together. That's dangerous in a good method of collecting data. And then some best practices. First of all, you design and define the categories of data, then you work down to the actual data that you're going to collect. Think it out, organize it before you start to even create anything or use software products like ours. Ensure all data is entered using the same format. We all think address differently, but Google has forced us down a path of thinking of address their way. Why? Because UPS and FedEx want it that way. We've all done that where this is my address, but they say, no, it's not. It's actually this. And so you want people to start acclimating to that same look and feel. Abbreviations, capitalizations, very important that everyone uses the same way. Because when the guy gets the data way at the end, he's going to say, is AVE Avenue or is it something else, right? Use closed-end responses. This is probably one of the most critical things our scientists have always found. You know, don't ask them to fill in because you think they know. Ask them to do the explicit, whether it's a rating, whether it's a yes, no, a pick list. We spend tons of time designing good pick lists. You even have to make sure pick lists are in the right order so that people don't always just take the first one and things like that. Numeric codes versus character strings. Well, it's always good to use the codes. Character strings, they take more time and they take more planning. So be careful what you ask, because the data then becomes convoluted over time, and as it's used or reused or goes through a day in science, it could be that they can't make a decision because 20% of the people maybe don't use the right abbreviation. If any data is unknown, research is the best method to handle. Make sure you take that time to really plan it out, to look at it and think about all the potential ways. It's not unusual for me to test my wife to see what she thinks a question means, just to go ahead and make sure it's good. Okay, so in today's world, we collect data. Chances are there's a data scientist at the back end who's going to want the data and probably put it with other data that's been collected. And they're going to expect some things. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But the first thing is, you don't give them today's date in relation to, say, a birth date. You just give them a birth date and the date it was collected. In other words, let them figure out some of those math equations for themselves. Give them the raw data. Don't figure it out for them in the form, even though it's kind of handy sometimes. But most people, if they collect the raw data, they can then do lots more with it later on. Then the hot item is metadata, right? Metadata is data about data. And we're gonna go through this in a second, but basically there is tons of growth on data about data and methods to do this. And there's lots of new tools and lots of new ways, but the final outcome is that a data scientist sitting in a place that he doesn't even have access to you can use your data and know that when you asked this question, it meant this. It had this value. It was these choices. So metadata says, here, let me collect this one value from everybody, from 50,000 people. But the metadata will say, well, this value represents this sort of, and it was in this context and so forth. And so we use a acronym called FAIR. It means findable, it's accessible, it's interoperable and reusable. But the key is that there's data provenance. We know where it came from and why it got there.
But I really like what you said about making sure that the data is right. Number one, explaining to somebody why you're collecting the data, really, really important. And then secondarily is how these people are processing. You were just saying about asking your wife. That's not even, that is an awesome idea, because the approaches from different people are going to say, what do you think about that question? It gives you the ability to then refine your question to get the answer that you're hoping to get within the categories that you give the pick list from, hopefully, right? Unless it's a broader.
So we spend a lot of time between scientists just asking, hey, did you collect, this is what I plan to collect, just to do that check all the time. So when we first come up with our how we're collecting data with a notebook, we go out and check it against other people before we send it out. It's always a great thing to do, whether it's a survey or a form that you're filling out.
And can you briefly go over the difference between using like a scientific method versus just shotgun or?
Sure. So the thing about scientific method is you do go through this design, this definition, this review of what's going on, what you're collecting. You spend a lot of time even prototyping your data to make sure that it makes sense to everyone who potentially is going to fill it in, right? Now that could be pretty wide. It's not to say you won't have exceptions, but the scientific method accounts for that. But it accounts for it in that we can have people augment data. We don't change data once we have it. Once we collect it, it has value. We wouldn't have collected otherwise. But in the scientific method, we actually allow for a method in which we say, oh, we need to get one more thing. So in our tool, for instance, the notebook allows them to add in that other column of data that they need to add in later. The scientific method, though, is also checking it as it comes in. It's also going through and making sure that the data we expected to collect is being collected as it happens. And with our software, we actually go through our platform, because it's this cloud-based database that allows them to see the data as it grows. So if we're going out to get 50,000 people to respond, whether they like chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry, we know on Monday how many chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry responses there were. No different than your polls, Okay, but quite the big difference is, of course, is that we're going to go through and test it out and make sure it is right, so we don't have to maybe add new flavor like pistachio. And so at that point, we can continue down a very distinct linear, like measure twice, cut once type of process. That's the scientific method. Most of the times when we make up surveys, Dave, I'm not pointing you out, but you're making up questions, almost thinking about the survey you have. You're not looking to analyze it later. Well, that's a great process. That works. But in a lot of cases, it's very expensive to ask people to do this. There's an overhead to taking people's time, and it's even more overhead to analyze what those people responded. And the scientific method is trying to make it linear so that you're not having to go back and say, oh yeah, one more question.
So, and this is kind of the layout of how your platform works, pulling information in.
That's
right.
You
mentioned it's web-based, and you can analyze it on the fly, right?
That's right, because it's sitting in a database in the cloud. We're in constant, I guess you would say, communication. By the way, our tool happens to work offline as well. Sometimes people don't have network available. Sometimes it goes out. It doesn't mean it has to keep them from entering the data in because they're in a remote place or perhaps just the Wi-Fi is out. So it will allows them to keep that notebook up to date, add those values in and respond to them. So if you had to on Monday and all of a sudden the internet were to have a glitch on Tuesday, you know that at least the only thing you've lost is the connected at the center, right? We don't have the queen bee showing us what data is out there. So you can see that we're about the data. We're about that quality data being entered in. We give history, we give an auditability to it so that we can go back and look. And guess what? We can report on it as it grows. We can report it on a gift status to our bosses to say, here's how it's looking as of this week of, say, a 6-week potential project. And it's a constant availability. So you can then put into all your huge analytical packages that are out there, whether it's SaaS or whether it's some other products. You can use that data many different ways. And remember, it's always available 24/7. So Sunday nights, you can quickly make your reports up for Monday morning.
Yeah, that's what everybody wants to do.
That's right. That's right. And we say our platform is flexible because we do offer a web-based front end. It runs in a cloud. It is always available, and the data provenance is a key point to the future. If we're going to collect all this data, eventually we're going to start valuing data. And when we start valuing data, guess what? We're going to make sure that if this data is going to make us make decisions for us, we need to know the origination, not where it was derived from, the 4 spreadsheets from somebody, but where it started. Did that data value start healthy? And in our case, because it's GXP compliant, it's auditable, we know exactly who did it and when they did it. In fact, in our tool, we actually ask for them to confirm a password to change data at times. Just because if they're going to change it, and if they're the expert that can change it, they got to say, I changed it on this date, and this is Jamie.
And I think that's one of the pieces for being able to improve from a lot of folks here said they're on the spreadsheet environment. That's how they do it. And being able to improve that data. And for simple things, you can get away. You know, if you're only 10 different people, that's not your wheelhouse, right? That's not what you need a tool for. But when you start talking about how is my agency performing in regarding to this particular deliverable, right? Or this particular program, how's that working? You're talking about surveying potentially thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. The impact of making it clean in the front end really makes the difference of being able to utilize that data on the back end and being able to see it in real time. Not a bad thing, right?
That's right. That's right.
So, and you're going to talk a little bit about just an overview of eStudy,
sure.
Just the tech for the propeller heads here.
Sure. So the database is Oracle based. As you know, they're an enterprise system. It's 100% web-based for access. So if there's internet, you have access. As I've said before, if it's offline, you can still get to it once you started. Scalable. It allows you to have 100, allows you to have 10,000. But more importantly, it gives you scalable on time. Data has relevance longer when you know where it came from and why you got it and where it originated from. It allows for data exchange and integration. It means that This data is sitting in the cloud. There's plenty of opportunities. In fact, we have customers all the time say, hey, I'd like to use the data this way. Can you give me an API? And we write custom APIs to get it to certain places, to get it all to work together for your data, I guess you would say advisors and scientists to correctly bring it in. It's compliant with GXP and 21 CFR Part 11. What that means is we're very compliant. In fact, that's a key thing for data in the future, right? We all know that we have to protect the rights of individuals. We have to protect the rights of the data they've entered, and we have to protect the data itself. Immediate results for all stakeholders. Maybe someone only needs to see one value out of hundreds, but the fact is he needs to do it on a Sunday night because Monday morning his boss has asked him for a report. It's quickly and easily customized to your science. And we say to fit your science because most people are under now a data science world. We used to just say it was IT. We used it very generic, but it's really about this data science and this expertise. So we're going to talk about the pieces and parts, but e-study manager is where you start. It's where you define it. It's designed by scientists for scientists, but we think it can scale easily to all other businesses to use in the same way, which is you create something to collect, you create something to put it together, and you send it out for people to put that data in, and it has that high security, that high protection of something. If you're collecting data, chances are it has a big value. We shouldn't minimize how much time is spent in collecting this data, or we shouldn't say, well, it's just for this survey during Dave's situation. Someday you might say, I want to look at all surveys over time for the last years. And that's when that is more importantly, how you design this out. Notebook manager is a uniform and consistent way. Everyone gets it at the same time when you want them to have it. Allows us to go around the world, all geographies as they need it. It's both the online and offline, as we said, and then of course it meets the compliancy. More and more now, the compliancy is going to grow into the data and where we source it and where we keep it.
Yep, that's not going to change.
And then publisher is the use of that data. So, you know, in the past, we would bring in Excel and we'd have to format it. And there's people that we always have the guy or the person in the office who knows how to make the report look wonderful. But now, why can't you create it once and bring all that data in as it changes in an automatic fashion, right? I just want to print this report. It's not a big deal. I want to print the same report I print every week for my managers or for my staff and have it come in the same way. Well, our publisher has exactly played that game for now 20 plus years. We can give reports that are specific for an agency like the EPA, and we can do it in a repetitive way. And not only that, you can make multiple people do reporting in the same way. How great would that be?
Yeah, and this is where your strength is, because you've done a ton of reports, especially for EPA, FDA, those types, for the way that they want to see it, not the way that people want it presented, right? That's the biggest difference.
So our customers build templates, they build them once, right? Build them once and use it many times. And that's a wonderful attribute.
Yep, love it. So this gets to the whole workflow that you have studied this across the board, whether you call it a study, experiment, trial, collection, whatever it happens to be, you're pulling data in, right? That's the whole idea. You want to collect this data and it's design, collect, report. It doesn't matter which program or process, this is the process you're going to do.
That's right.
And the better you are at the front end of that design, this is the key.
That's right. We've emphasized a lot on the things to consider in the design aspect. But yeah, we've gone down this path. And oftentimes people want to know what they want to see the report, right? How many times do you build a PowerPoint and you start putting bullets up? Well, you actually need to think about what you're trying to express in the whole document.
Exactly. So we mentioned this before. So this has been in use, USDA, EPA doing the reports to them on behalf of some pretty major corporations, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And we have to not only collect data from places around the world. These are very succinct groups of scientists who have tested seeds and chemicals and things like that. And then they have to go have it analyzed. They take little punches out of leaves and they go to an analytical lab. Nowadays, we have gene processing and sequencing and things like that. And it has to all be put together and all compiled into a report that the USDA and EPA need to see, as well as the customer who asked for these things to be done on their behalf.
That's exactly right. So while you've been doing it in these other places, the methodology works in any agency.
That's right.
For whatever purpose it is. Now, we're not, like we said before, if you've got to, survey 10 or 20 people, that's not what we're talking about here, right?
No.
And there are instances when it doesn't work, but the idea here, it's not the right tool. Like you mentioned earlier, if it's not the right tool, you're going to tell them which tool would be the best tool to use, right?
So 10 or 20 people, the numbers aren't so important. It's about the importance of the data collection. Yep. 10 or 20 people, sure, you could survey and do it once, but chances are 10 or 20 people over time.
That's a different scenario.
That's right. From around the world, from different places at different times. It requires a very careful methodology. And we think the scientific methodology addresses these sort of needs. The importance of data, good data collection, a good platform for not only today, for collecting it, but for keeping it alive.
And to your point, and there's a lot of folks that were asking the question, like, how do you maintain the integrity of the data? When we were talking people earlier, maintaining the data, being able to tell that it's solid and you can't manipulate it afterwards.
That's right.
It's baked in, right?
It's designed well. We don't allow people just to change things. You have to say whether you're transcribing it from some device, say you're getting a meter reading of some sort. Mm-hmm. You have to be explicit on how it's kept. Then it's kept in an Oracle database, which also has very specific rules and regulations about who can keep the data, change it, surmise it. There's lots of ways that we can design this up front so that you can do many things on the back. But the one thing we won't go against, because we audit it and we make sure that we know who's putting that data in, is that data integrity from the very start.
Yep. And no matter what tool you use, that's a critical component.
Absolutely.
Is the design, making sure your questions are right. And some of that is, you get into some psychology there of how you're asking the questions. You even mentioned it, making sure you don't put the easiest answer up front at the top, because people are creatures of habit.
That's right.
So there you go. So, all right. So here we go. We asked some folks about this. We know that there's some folks that have needs right now, but ultimately, where are you? When do you expect a data collection requirement? Because we want to make sure we get you some additional information and provide any resources immediately. Q4 2021, that is actually calendar year. So anyway, we got somebody that's immediately, we make sure we get that open. So
I think we're in Q4 now.
Here. What's that?
I think we're in Q4.
We're actually past Q4. This R&D, this poll is not correct, not planned properly, Jamie.
Yep. There we go.
But the sometime in FY 2022 still works. So does Q1 FY 2022. So that will be corrected in the future. That's one of those things that you can't change after you start it and you're in the middle of a live presentation.
That's right. That's right.
But that was not your software. That was bad internal planning. And so you see how that works? Right back at you.
Trying to prove what's not good.
Yeah. That's right. So that's one thing. Anyway, so you guys know what we mean. So Ista, so tell us a little bit about the takeaways here.
Sure. So first of all, we believe that our software was built using good scientific methodology, using many of the best practices we discussed before. We work every day to continue those best practices and to implement them into our product when we do these studies. Good design equals good data. You can't, because of the growth of data, there must be a reason why it's growing. Well, it is because it has value. That value needs to be harbored or even stewarded. We need to each be a steward to our data. And scaling bad data is not the way. You keep building bad data, you have just lots more pain coming when you have to get rid of it. And you question all that time you took to get it.
And I'll throw in on that number too, is that the investment of the time and the effort in the beginning is, and I've talked to many different CIOs and their program management teams about the challenge of cleaning up the data after the fact becomes very, very challenging and very, very expensive. And ultimately, the timeliness, if you're doing something with a timely data and you have to scrub it later, you've already blown the time frame by the time it gets. And that's one of the biggest challenges that folks have. So I'm going to end this poll right here and open it up for everybody to ask any questions. If you have any questions, you can do the Q&A or as well as the chat, and we'll make sure that you get what you need in order to do that. I'm going to keep rolling until somebody asks a question. And as we mentioned earlier, there is no obligation for your participation in this to purchase from any vendor. But if you want to, you can, because iAdvantage is a GSA contract holder. And if you need partners for the contracting folks here, if you need 8A or service disabled, whatever it happens to be able to fulfill, if, like we have folks from the VA, we know that has to go through veteran owned. So you guys can help with that as well. So you have your GSA contract that you can purchase from. You all will get a recap presentation, which will include the video, a link to the video, as well as the presentation itself and the iAdvantage capabilities. And we're looking for information. I'll tell you this, a little preview here. I know you are going to be meeting with some of the senior folks at agencies, especially dealing with big data with the CIO Council. And you're going to be working on some information to supply the CIO Council. And we would love to get your insight on that. And that really just requires a short meeting to say, what are you doing? What are you experiencing right now? And how that, and what kind of a tool are you looking for? And if it's iAdvantage, great. If it's not, Jamie, what are you going to do?
We're going to point them the right way.
That's exactly right.
We love tough problems. That's where we started. That's how we started this whole situation here.
You did. And,
yeah.
And I love, and dealing with scientists, that's not an easy thing, right? I mean,
that's right.
They're
creative people.
And they wind up being very process oriented as well. So they want it to be clean, and you're helping them do that.
That's right.
All right. So I don't see anything right here at the moment. Any parting comments that you have for anybody?
No, just absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity, and please feel free to reach out to us if anything is even close to an idea. We would love to discuss it.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that you get that information. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We got you out of here in 40 minutes like we wanted to. So that's awesome.
Nice.
So we did that. Jamie, great. Thanks for sharing that. I think it's great information for folks as they're making sure how much does it cost, by the way, for you to do just, hey, talk to them about their design?
Nothing at all.
Nothing. Free.
Nothing. Yeah.
My favorite four-letter word. That's right. So please reach out to Jamie. His information is right there. If you need anything from us with GovBrief, I'll be glad to help you out in that. And with that, we're going to let everybody get out of here. And I do appreciate you, Jamie, very much. And we appreciate your sharing your knowledge. You've been doing this for quite a while.
Yep.
So I appreciate it, guys. Thanks. See you.
Thank you.